because Anita Hill gave us the word. I mean, those of us who know and were around then, there wasn't even a word for it. It was just the way things were. Men got to do this and women had to just deal with it, put up with it. And suddenly there was a word for it. And then it kind of went away. It just went away. We thought that was going to change everything. It didn't. Okay, so now we have this other uprising, this new uprising with younger women and speaking up and being believed. And men are starting to rethink, oh, maybe it's not okay that I treat women this way. And and a lot of men are nervous, and that's good. And men should be mindful. And there are so many feminist men that have been mindful, but maybe they didn't speak up. And now they're speaking up. And it's all very exciting.
Now, most of you know Christine Lahti for her 40-year stage and screen career, marked by many indelible performances, including Sylvie in the 1987 screen version of Marilyn Robinson's novel Housekeeping, her scene-stealing Hazel in Jonathan Demme's Swing Shift, which earned her an Oscar nomination, and her Emmy-winning role as Dr. Kate Austin on the CBS drama Chicago Hope. Most recently, she's appeared on the series The Blacklist and The Good Fight. She won an Oscar in 1995 for her short film Lieberman in Love and directed the feature My First Mister in 2001, won a Golden Globe for the TV film No Place Like Home, directed by Lee Grant, and starred on Broadway in The Heidi Chronicles and God of Carnage. Christine Lahti can now add author to that impressive resume. Her new collection of essays, True Stories from an Unreliable Eyewitness of Feminist Coming of Age, is just out, and she's here to talk to us about it. I'm so honored to introduce and welcome to the Boston Public Library actress, director, activist, and author, Christine Lahti.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
Welcome to Boston, Christine.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Look at all these lovely women. Couple of men. We have a few men. I love it, though. I love all these women. Okay.
And you love Boston, you were saying.
I do. I haven't spent much time here, but every time I'm here, I'm just blown away by how beautiful it is.
Yeah, even in the rain.
Yeah.
So you chart your evolution as a feminist in many of the essays in this very wonderful book. And one of them is called Walking, where you talk about how you were so crudely propositioned by a casting director. And I think it was hard for me to remember what it must have been like now with so much about sexual harassment, Me Too and Time's Up movements. I mean, this is the 70s with the first wave of the second wave of feminism. When you think back to that time, how was it to remember that as you wrote the essay? You want to say a little bit about what it's about? But just in general, in those early years of your career, what was that like?
Well, first of all, the essay is called Walking, and it's about this audition I had for 2 national commercials, and I had decided that I was really too much of an artiste to do commercials. But I had waitressed for too many years, and I was tired of being so self-righteous. So I decided I would really like to get it. I'd like to really sell out at this time in my life and get a commercial. And this casting director said, you can have these 2 commercials, but you just have to sleep with the 2 directors. And he said it that matter-of-factly, and when he saw my face, which was horrified and aghast, went further and he said, the only way you're going to make it, Christine, is to sleep your way to the top. And he listed 5 actresses who were big stars and said, that's how they did it, that's how you have to do it, it's just a reality for someone like you. I don't know what that meant, maybe because I was too tall or not conventionally beautiful, I don't know, but it was so horrifying to me. And I was a brand new baby feminist, but at least I had the beginnings of that, thank God, from the second wave in college in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I was able to say no, but I was sobbing while I was saying it. And I walked home for 75 blocks to my apartment in the Village. And that's when my feminism went from my head and it dropped bone deep. And I knew that it would be a life jacket that I would need to navigate through a world that did not like or respect women enough. And by the time I got home, I was determined to never let any man ever treat me like that again. But then, of course, a few hours later, a boy calls and asks me to go to an opening of a film, and I say no because I felt 5 pounds too heavy. So, but that's kind of my book, is that it's that my feminism has been an evolution. I keep having awakenings. I'm still having awakenings. It's not like, okay, I'm on the feminist wagon and I never fall off. That's not been my story. So anyway, it's how I look back at it now, though, through the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement, is I had a friend say when I was recounting this story, he said, maybe when you write it in the book, maybe you should change it that the man assaulted you or raped you. And I said, wait a second, why? He said, well, you want it to be a real story. And it made me realize that what he did not get was, it was enough of a story. I went in there with a full optimism as a young actress, thinking that I was of value as a woman, I was of value as an actor, I had talent and I had intelligence and accomplishments. And what this man did to me is he broke me. He took away my humanity in that moment by objectifying me and treating me like a sex object. It devastated me. So I said to my friend, I don't need to embellish this story. You don't understand what this does to women, is it dehumanizes them. And it can have an effect for the rest of their lives.
That's so interesting, because what you've done with the book is to be very honest and really look at your life and not try to embellish things or sugarcoat things. And some of the passages are quite funny and entertaining. And I want to ask you about that, because it seemed to me when I was reading it that this is very much what you're attracted to as an actress as well. You have done comic roles, you've done very dramatic roles. You seem to enjoy that duality.
I do, yeah. I think I live my life on that cusp between, that thin line between tragedy and comedy. And I have always, in my personal life, I have always used humor as a way of getting through the dark times. So yeah, I love doing comedy, I love doing tragedy. I don't think there's that much difference, honestly, in terms of acting them. It's just the stakes are high. And you got to do it truthfully, and the more honest they are, the funnier they are. But yeah, there's a lot of humor in this book. It's again the way I've been able to navigate through some really dark times.
What made you want to write this kind of book, Christine, which is very personal? Even the comic parts are personal, like you just mentioned, the sexual harassment story. It's very exposing yourself and being very honest, as opposed to a story about your career, which you could have easily done a great book about that. But why did you want to go the memoir route and to be so honest in some of this? Right? Yeah,
I've never been attracted to celebrity memoirs. I don't think they're interesting. I mean, to say, oh, this is how I got this part, and then I worked with this movie star, and then I got this part. I'm just bored by them. So this, to me, I wanted to really try to be a real writer. I really wanted to have some literary value to this. So I decided, well, first of all, I started to write because I hit a dark time in my life, in my early 60s, when I got hit with a tsunami of ageism in Hollywood. Now, it really starts when a woman is in her 40s, maybe after 35. I mean, it's disgusting because it doesn't affect men, really. It's that women, actresses, have a shelf life, and I was so naive, I didn't quite get that. So I was fortunate enough to get some interesting parts, some really interesting parts, in my 40s, 50s, some great parts. And then I got to be early 60s, and it all dried up. The good parts dried up. And I was despairing because I felt at the top of my game. I felt like I was at my creative prime, right? I had so much more experience to bring to my art, and And I finally didn't really give a shit about what other people thought. I mean, not completely, but less so. And now there's not going to be any good parts. So I was despairing, and my 21-year-old kick-ass feminist daughter said, "Mom," as only 21-year-old daughters can say to their mothers, "Mom, quit complaining. Stop waiting around for a man to hire you and go create your own shit." So she said, "You have a lot of great stories. Start writing them down." And I said, "Honey, that sounds great, but I'm not a writer." She said, "Is it okay if I swear a little bit here?" "It's okay." Yeah, that's all right. She said, "Okay, well then just so go learn how to write, bitch." And I don't think she really said bitch, but that's how it felt, because she's my daughter. It felt like she was saying that. I took her words to heart, and I started to write my stories down. At first, it was like vomit. It was like I turned on this rusty old faucet, and a lifetime of words just spewed out of me. And then I worked with wonderful acting coaches, and I started writing these at first as monologues, and I performed them at little tiny cabarets and bars in the East Village and in Los Angeles, and that's how I honed them. And then finally, I decided to turn it into a book. But my daughter and my editor at HarperCollins and various female friends, the challenge was always go deeper, quit lying, quit trying to sugarcoat it, be more honest. And I took that challenge. It was not always easy, but I'm so proud of, because I've always tried to be you don't know this, but it's true. I have been trying to be a perfectionist till around 59 years old, I think. I stopped trying to be perfect and decided that the way to find true agency for me was not respect from out there or trophies or awards. It was really coming to terms with my own imperfections, accepting the mistakes, cherishing the falls and the failures. And that's how I felt ultimately in writing this book, that I found more true agency than I ever had in my life.
And there are some passages that I can tell you were pushed to go deep, because it doesn't come on a first draft. Which were the hardest ones to write?
The story about my sister. My sister had a severe bipolar disorder, and she took her life. And the writing about the story about my sister was therapeutic and healing, I found. I didn't know it was going to be. But after draft after draft after draft, after be more honest, I was able to get in touch with my anger towards her, my disbelief, my guilt, all the things that one has. If anyone here has been touched by a suicide, you go through. But I wanted to really grapple with all that, but ultimately try to grapple with why she made this choice and ultimately understand it. That's what I came to, is I finally understood. Because in a way, as an actress, I'm putting myself inside the skin of another human being, right? So I don't judge them. So I put myself inside the skin of my sister and writing about her, writing her voice, and I realized that she had just been through hell and she'd had enough, and it was her choice. It was her right to have it be over.
It's a really moving passage. It's heartbreaking, but it's beautifully written. You also wrote very poignantly about your dad, your mom too, but the passage about your dad I found moving because it was so wrapped up with one of your most iconic roles, and that's in the film Running on Empty, with Judd Hirsch and directed by Sidney Lumet. And I just want to ask you a little bit about how it felt when you found out that your dad, who is this sort of stoic and not very demonstrative person that you write about, how he responded to that film.
So yeah, my dad was a 50s, typical toxic, masculine, although gentle person, but he was very limited. Again, I had a lot of anger towards him as a feminist, a young feminist, the way he treated my mom, which was never abusive, but it was demeaning. It was as if she was less than. And the whole suburb I grew up in treated all the housewives' mothers as if they were second-class citizens. And it really bothered me, and I blamed my dad a lot. But what I learned also in writing the story about him was he was a product of his time. He was limited by so many sort of rigid gender rules about men. He couldn't cry, he couldn't be really nurturing, he was the breadwinner, he was rarely home, he didn't know how to be close to his children. He really did suffer from those narrow masculine, sort of toxic masculine gender limitations. So I found a forgiveness, in working through all that. But what I found out from my mom is that in the movie Running on Empty, there's a scene between my father and I. My father was played by Stephen Hill, this brilliant actor. And what my dad had done is that he had memorized all the lines, and he watched the film over and over, and he would mouth the words, he would mouth the lines, my character and Stephen Hill's character. And the truth is that scene really reflected a lot of the feelings that my dad and I had about each other. From his point of view, I was a radical, I don't know what. I mean, I was a hippie, I was a feminist. He didn't understand any of it. It was scary to him. He was a Republican. So I was a real, he was scared, I think, of where I was going. And I think a lot of the feelings that the dad in the movie had, he had about me. And I related completely to the woman in the scene. I didn't have to do a lot of homework. But that was astonishing to me that he felt, I don't know, maybe that was his way of getting close to me, is that he played that scene by watching it and saying the words. I don't know, it was very moving to me.
It's very moving the way you write about it. It's surprising and yet not surprising. And that just shows the power of film to communicate and how these films bind us, even your own father. It's quite amazing. Now, anyone who's written memoir or read about memoir, one of the big things is the fear of people reading it who you know are close to you, recognize themselves. Did you have any trepidation about your siblings reading some of these stories about your sister, your brother, your dad, and your mom?
Yeah, the four family members that I write about have all passed away. I could not have written about them if they were alive. I just couldn't. Not with honesty. But what happened with my brother and sister, who are still alive and still with us, is I recounted a story that was very traumatic for me when I was 8 years old, when we were all on a family trip. My dad kicked my mom out of the car because she smoked in the car. And from my point of view, I was sitting in the very far back of our station wagon. My dad drove away, and I just saw my mom getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I thought I was never going to see her again. I thought my dad had abandoned my mother in Chicago with 6 kids in the car, and he was just going to take off. Excuse me. So I write about it in the book, and I was telling my brother and sister, I said, do you remember this horrible thing that happened? And they said, what? I said, no, don't tell me you don't remember. You were in the car, guys. You don't remember. And they said, no, we kind of remember something weird happened. No, don't really remember that. So I decided that, okay, fine. These memories are indeed my emotional memories. Memory is, by nature, flawed and subjective, hence the title, True Stories from an Unreliable Eyewitness. They say, scientifically that if 2 people are watching a car accident or a crime, they'll have eyewitnesses. They'll have completely different stories because of trauma. And it's true that scientifically, when there's high emotion and trauma, the brain cannot code the memory. It doesn't get coded into the brain. So I knew that I was safe with my brother and sister. I could write from my point of view, my subjective emotional memory, and they could have a disclaimer and say, well, that happened to her, it didn't happen to me.
As a writer, how did you stoke the memory? How did you learn to trust your memories? And also, what writerly tricks did you learn to try to get to things that you might have forgotten about or weren't there? Or am I remembering this this way? Because you go back pretty far to childhood and to things that you may have wondered if you're remembering it right.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I tried to remember it as accurately as possible and to be as authentic as I could be. So what I did is I would just sit in the scene. Like as an actor, you put yourself into the circumstances of the character and of the place and what's just happened. And I would sit in the scene and really try to do a sense memory of the event. I'd actually used a sense memory, affective memory exercise, which is an acting exercise. If anyone here is an actor, you know of it. It's a method acting kind of thing. And I'd use that scene in the car as an exercise in my acting class. But it's a similar thing to do for me as a writer. So I thought about what my dad was wearing, what I was smelling, what my mom was doing, and where the smoke was in the car, and where I was seated, and the snow, and what that felt like when she opened. I mean, all those deep sort of specific sensory memories just helped me get back into that moment and relive it, and therefore hopefully write it as honestly and specifically as I could.
The book feels to me like the work of someone who's matured and who has grown wise and who has lived through this stuff and has the perspective to talk about it. Could you have written this book 20 years ago or 30 years ago?
Hell no. No. I would have tried to be, I don't know, sweeter, nicer. I would have tried to probably lie. And no, it's true. I would have looked for approval more than authenticity. The truth is, if I hadn't had this dark period of ageism that I got hit with, I don't think I would have written the book. I think I would have just gone on and played these fabulous parts and it's the same with directing. I didn't start directing until I had no acting opportunities. I had just given birth to twins and nobody was looking to hire me. And instead of getting despairing and victimy, I decided, okay, I was already 42 when I had twins, and already ageism was hitting. And I decided, okay, instead of sexist ageism is not my fault, but it is my responsibility. So I'm not going to sit around and be victimized by this. I'm going to change course. What else can I do? So I directed, and this time I didn't have anything to do, and there was no directing gigs. So I thought, okay, now quick, what else can I do? Because it's a dark hole. It's a dark hole to go down to there, and you start feeling like your value is gone and you're not relevant, and maybe you should go out to pasture like the culture is telling you to, and then you got to say no, I know I can do more, and I'm going to try something else. And I had to be creative. I had to find another outlet for my creativity, or I would have gone crazy.
And this from somebody who looks absolutely fantastic. Right?
Thank you. Listen, ageism, it's a horrible thing. I'm sure older women in every field feel it. Yeah. It's not just Hollywood. It might be harder in Hollywood. It starts maybe at a younger age, and you see, 75-year-old men and their girlfriends on screen are 30, and you want to throw up. You just want to, I want to just throw rocks at the billboards. Like, what are you doing? And the men think that they look sexier being with these young women that could be their daughters. No, they look desperate to me. I hate it.
But it is an industry that looks obsessed, and much more so for women. And you go there in the book. You write an amazing passage called Waiting, which is to me, very bravely to say that cosmetic surgery is a reality in the business, and you have considered it, and you look so fantastic, but that's not the reality of when you're looking for work and when everyone does it, and it's the norm, and it's pervasive. So you again are dealing with the conflict of your feminist self, which is against all of that, and you're just a normal human being who wants to be liked and to look good and to work. So tell me, let's tell, not me, everyone a little bit about that passage called Waiting.
Yeah, this story is about waiting. It's the 10 times I waited in a waiting room of a plastic surgeon's office. 10 times. I went to have consultations about various things and never went through with it because this feminist side of me would say, what are you doing here? Get out. What are you doing here? And yet the reality, I don't judge women for doing this. Certainly don't judge men for doing it. It's a lot of women feel, and I have felt many times, why not? Why not do it? I mean, I want to work. I'm not going to change the industry by, I'm going to hold out. I don't get any brownie points for not having plastic surgery. And I don't judge women for doing it. What I resent is that women are valued only when they're younger. And that makes me so angry and enrages me so much. I think, well, why am I going to succumb to that? It makes no sense to me. I think women have more value when they're older, when they have their life experiences on their face and they don't cut it all up and blow it all up. And it makes me so sad sometimes when I see these women that have done so much that now they can't work. They've done so much work they can't get any work. And there are cautionary tales like that. We've all seen them. And it's sad, but I understand why these women do it. I understand their need to stay relevant, their need to stay working. They love their job. They don't want to be put out to pasture. So I get it. And the jury's still out for me. I'm not saying never say never.
What do you think of what do you hope young feminists, because I know you spoke at the Women's March in LA and you're very active and still as a feminist, but what do you think of the young feminists who now are pushing the Me Too and the Time's Up movements? But what would you hope they take away from a woman that's been through the feminism of the 70s and 80s that you were? Do you hope for them? And your daughter's one. I mean, what do you hope for that generation?
Well, first of all, I'm thrilled. These young women, maybe because they had feminist mothers, I like to think that. But these young women, like my daughter, are so much more empowered and have so much more agency than we had at their age. I teach these acting master classes, and I start to say to the women specifically, I say, you can't just act. You got to write, you got to direct, you got to produce, you got to create your own material. And they say, duh, we're already doing that. We already have a web series, and we're already directing this, and we've already... They're already taking charge of their careers. And as an actor in my generation, we were, and many are, still so dependent on writers and directors and producers and studios to hire you. You can't just act. Writing, there's a lot more empowerment and agency in writing because you can do it on your own. But another difference between my generation and young feminists, which I think is so interesting, and at first it confused me, but in the second wave of feminism, I can't speak for all women, but for me, it was really important never to be objectified. So I would downplay my sexuality. I would never, ever consider doing nudity. I wanted to, because I knew that I would be playing then probably a two-dimensional woman, and I wanted to be taken seriously. I wanted more than anything, I wanted respect as a woman, as an actor. So I thought, well, if I do that, that's the last thing I want to do because I won't be respected. And I think young women now feel like they don't have to deny any part of themselves. If they want to look sexy on Instagram or whatever, Kim Kardashian, whatever, I applaud those women. I think, go for it. She's an incredible entrepreneur. She's a multi-millionaire. It's fine. I think it's to be celebrated that women don't feel they have to hide any part of themselves. They can celebrate what they want. And if they look sexy in a picture and are really being provocative and some man objectifies them or treats them like a sex object, that's their problem. They don't feel that way. They own it. They know that they're valued, their intellect is valued, their talents are valued, their accomplishments are valued. And I think that's so beautiful. And it took me a while to get there, because at first it confused me that Kim Kardashian called herself a feminist. I didn't get that. But my daughter helped me realize, okay, I see. Okay, that's different than what I thought or what I would have done, but yeah, this was all good.
How did you feel when the revelations began to come out about the sexual abuse, harassment, all the improprieties? I mean, you went through it yourself, but were you shocked or were you not surprised?
So not surprised. But what was so heartening was that finally women were being heard and believed. And it's these young women. I mean, I'm really convinced that they have a kind of agency. They know that their voices are important. And honestly, I've been dreaming about this Me Too, Time's Up movement my entire adult life. I was speaking with Gloria Steinem last night. Obviously, she's been dreaming about it. And to actually see a seismic shift in our culture, even internationally, I have some guarded optimism that this is going to last. But I'm a little bit guarded because Anita Hill gave us the word. I mean, those of us who know and were around then, there wasn't even a word for it. It was just the way things were. Men got to do this and women had to just deal with it, put up with it. And suddenly there was a word for it. And then it kind of went away. It just went away. We thought that was going to change everything. It didn't. Okay, so now we have this other uprising, this new uprising with younger women and speaking up and being believed. And men are starting to rethink, oh, maybe it's not okay that I treat women this way. And and a lot of men are nervous, and that's good. And men should be mindful. And there are so many feminist men that have been mindful, but maybe they didn't speak up. And now they're speaking up. And it's all very exciting.
So you mentioned Gloria Steinem last night. Your book tour has just started. We're one of the first cities, which is exciting. So you were in New York last night, and I just think people would love to hear about what it was like to sit down with someone you've admired all these years and who's just such an icon to many of us.
Yeah, the first thing I said last night was, I think I've died and I've woken up in feminist heaven. Not only did I never, in my wildest dreams, thought I would write a book, but that it would be through the lens of my feminism, which I had learned from Gloria, and then that have Gloria Steinem interviewing me was beyond anything I had ever imagined or dreamt about. But she was, she's a friend, actually, not to drop names, but she's a friend. I've known her for a long time, and she and I have spent so many 3-hour, 4-hour dinners discussing our mothers and how we both feel that we are living the unlived lives, in some ways, of our mothers. And she had a complicated relationship. Anyone who has read her book, My Life on the Road, is a brilliant book. I highly recommend it. She talks a lot about her father and her mother. And excuse me, Gloria was one of the friends who badgered me about writing a book, writing my story. Not a book, just write your stories. And she would listen to some of mine and she'd kind of be shocked after I would tell her a few of my doozies, and she'd say, I can't believe you survived. You have to write these stories down. And first of all, I never thought of myself as a survivor. None of us probably ever do. We just think, well, we just have to get through our days, right? We're not thinking that we're survivors of anything. And then when I started thinking about my stories, I thought, well, maybe I am a little bit of a survivor. But I also didn't know I had any stories to write that were of worth to anyone else. I didn't know. I'm now just getting feedback from people who have read it. And it's so moving to me that my stories help other people think of theirs, or inspire people to maybe not be so hard on themselves, or to embrace their mistakes like I try to do in my book. Just that it's moving people and affecting people is so beautiful to me. In fact, I talked to a man the other day who read it, and he said that he laughed and cried by page 30, and I was so happy, because you just don't know when you write who it's going to touch.
Well, I think everyone who's tried to write anything would wonder who's going to be interested in this. Yeah. That's a common fear. Is this, I might think this is funny, or I might think this is interesting, and will people? So to trust that in yourself. Besides Gloria, who's a terrific person to get advice from, were there any books or writers that you knew that you tried to draw inspiration from? Did you consult anyone else that may have gone through this? Because it's not easy to sit down, like you said, and just.
Oh yeah, I honestly think my first drafts were just horrible. But I read books like Annie Lamott's Bird by Bird, an incredible handbook on how to write essays. Mary Carr's the art of the essay, memoir. Sorry. And then I worked with great writing coaches who would work with me draft after draft. And because I know how to gauge an audience by performing a lot of these as monologues. I was able to really gauge when an audience was getting bored, when I had it, okay, I'm explaining too much, I have to cut. And the mantra show, don't tell was always in the back of my mind because I had a tendency to want to explain everything. And of course, that's the death of good writing. But I've worked with so many brilliant writers over the years in development of plays or development of screenplays. And I've really learned as a director and an actor how to have a very taut, forward-moving narrative. And if anyone's here who's a writer, you know that's like the key thing, right? You're on a train and you don't want to get off and you just want to keep it taut and have the story always moving forward, a beginning, middle, and end. So each story has a real journey. And I knew that instinctively as an actor. I always look for that in scripts, and if a scene doesn't have that, I try to work with the actor, or the writer to, come on, can we maybe cut the subtext, cut the explaining, and really find a journey for every scene.
That's really interesting because it occurs to me that many of the chapters are relatively short. They are very quick. You get right to the point, and there's also a lot of dialogue. Which is interesting. So when you're performing that must be interesting for you to, you get to be different characters or you get to change voices. But it very much feels like that you probably wrote a lot and then cut a lot away.
I did. I cut so much, and I went through, I don't know, 50 drafts maybe it was over 3 years that I performed these over and over again in new drafts and listen, I read these stories to anybody who would listen. I once had extensions done, and I had a woman who did my extensions, and I knew I had her for 3 hours. So I had my computer there, and I read her some drafts of these stories, and I got great feedback from her. I said, what do you get from that? Well, I don't really. It was really invaluable. I might have even read one to a taxi driver. I'm not sure.
You are going to read for us very soon, and I know you're going to read from the chapter about your mother. How difficult was that for you to write? Because it's one of the key chapters in the book.
I had a very complicated relationship with my mother, and I don't want to give too much away because I'm about to read the story, but it was hard for me, again, to be honest about how, I don't know, I didn't treat her very well during a certain time period when I was really rebelling and finding my feminism, and I judged her very, very harshly, and it was hard for me to go there. Again, my daughter said, you quit lying. You weren't nice to your mom in the way that you're trying to paint yourself. So I tried to really go there, and it was painful. And ultimately, again, in writing this story, I felt such healing because I don't want to talk about it. You're going to see.
That's part of the feminist journey because you were coming of age in the 70s, and for many of us, our mothers were products of the 50s, and it was two completely different worlds. It's a little different today. The worlds aren't quite as different as the word.
You're so right, Lauren. There was such a chasm, and a huge chasm between the 50s housewives and women and this second wave of feminism. I don't even know if there's two generations that were more different in terms of women's rights and feminism. Yes, now their young women they're intersectional feminists, which is a fantastic focus and a necessary focus. That we didn't have that word, although it was, as Gloria said, there was never such thing as white feminism because it isn't feminist if it doesn't include everybody. She said that last night. But anyway, yeah, I mean, my mom was a product of her time. So, yeah.
Do we want to go into the reading now? Okay, all right. Well, you're going to read from the chapter, a very key chapter in the book called The Smile of Her.
That's my mom. And this is how she always entered our house. Oh, yahoo, Yudi Hoodie, I'm home. Her ruby red smile, framed by two deep dimples and a glamorous black beauty mark, was as constant and reliable as breathing. I'm pretty sure when she slept, she smiled. She bedazzled everyone with this smile. I remember as a young girl, I would walk by her side and proudly watch as others fell helpless under its spell. But during college in 1970, as a brand new feminist, I began to see my mother's smile as something a bit more complicated. Jesus Christ, Mom, what's wrong with you? Why, what? She asked, instinctively touching her hair, capturing any strays that had escaped. Why are you smiling so much? It looks totally fake. We entered the grocery store during an obligatory visit home. She proceeded to chirp, hello, how are you? To the cashier, the customers, the grocery bagger, and the produce man. Hello, how's your wife? Oh, I love your dress. Oh my goodness, don't your tomatoes look absolutely scrumptious today? Why are you being like this? You don't know any of these people. Why are you being so cheery? Dad never even says hi to anyone. Well, gosh, honey, I don't know. I think I just like to be friendly. She explained, her smile now as automatic as the supermarket doors that swung open compliantly whenever anyone came near. Mom, who are you going to vote for, Nixon or McGovern? I suddenly challenged her. Oh, well, I don't know, honey. I guess whoever your dad votes for, why? I moved away from her so that she wouldn't rub off on me. Infectious like poison ivy. After college, I moved to New York City, where after a few years, I found myself saying, any woman who smiles a lot isn't paying fucking attention. Determined not to be objectified, I refused to wear skirts or dresses. Makeup was absolutely out, except for auditions. And on a visit home, I feared the gap between Mom and I had become too wide to bridge. Nevertheless, I helped her in the kitchen, stirring a big pot of pea soup one evening, and I thought it was time to let the bitch out of the bag. I watched her whole body deflate when I came out to her as a feminist. Oh, honey, does this mean you're a lesbian? No, Mom, no. Why? Well, honey, you just don't seem to take pride in your appearance as you used to, honey, she said mournfully. And I can't help but notice you're not shaving your legs anymore. Mom, that has nothing to do, honey, just don't mind me. I'll love you no matter what, but I'm just worried. You know, things might be harder for you, sweetheart. I don't think many men are going for these women liber type of gals. Your dad certainly doesn't like them, said the woman whose husband took her credit cards away from her whenever she misbehaved. 6 months later, Mom visited me in New York. We went out to lunch, and she handed me a book. Here, Chris, The Total Woman by Mirabelle Morgan. I think it can help you, honey. We were in a smoky restaurant on the Upper West Side near my studio apartment that was filled with cockroaches and my Bibles. The feminine mystique, the diary of Anais Nin, and sisterhood is powerful. She patted her hair, saw the mortified look on my face, and snatched the book back to read from a quote on the book jacket. A total woman caters to her man's special quirks. It teaches wives to greet their husbands at the front door wearing sexy outfits like saran wrap to cover their naked bodies. It's only when a woman surrenders her life to her husband, worships him, and is willing to serve him that she becomes really beautiful to him. Mom, are you fucking kidding me? Honey, please don't swear. I just think if you smiled a little bit more, it might help you find more jobs. It might even help you find a boyfriend, you know? See, I've been having a rough time with Dad lately, and, well, this book has given me a mom. Do you not understand who I am? Or at least who I am trying. Sweetie, just read it. I think you'll see that you could really get your way with men if you just treat them like kings. Now, don't tell your dad I told you this, but the other day I tried greeting him at the door, butt naked, except for a cowboy hat and high heels with a martini in hand, and my every wish was his command. Oh boy. I threw up a little in my mouth. I watched her as she talked now, with a face that didn't even seem to be her own anymore. Shortly after our conversation, she told me that she'd signed up to become one of Mirabelle Morgan's ambassadors, speaking at her conventions and trying to sell her theories, and I guess also saran wrap. I didn't know. Months later, I was home. We were having a glass of wine. So, how's the whole total woman thing been working out for you, Mom? Are things better with Dad? Oh, honey, you were right. That book just turned out to be a lot of hooey. Just stopped working, you know. After all that, I still didn't get what I wanted from him, which is, I don't know. It's hard to explain. And then, out of the blue, after another cocktail, she ripped off her smile, and right in front of me, the floodgates burst open for the very first time. Oh God, Christine, I can't stand this anymore. Your dad's such a chauvinist. Yeah, I know, Mom. Duh, what else is new? He's always been a chauvinist. No, you don't understand, honey. I think he might be having an affair. Her words hung unmoving in the air. Wait, what, Mom? Really? Are you serious? Well, I don't know for sure, but it just seems like he doesn't care about me anymore. Mom, isn't this between you and Dad? No, I can't talk to him about anything. He doesn't listen to me. He just ridicules me. She gasped through inconsolable sobs. I wanted to scream at my dad, at every man, but I didn't. Instead, I yelled at her. Okay, so fucking divorce him, Mom. Leave him. If you're that miserable, just go. Despite the fact that I knew that she would never leave him, I pressed further. Nothing's going to change by complaining to me about this, Mom. Tell him about this shit, not me. Quit being such a fucking victim. She looked at me, stunned at the sudden loss of her one presumed ally, and then silently went back to washing the dishes. A few days later, Mom came into her bedroom and closed the door. She sat with me on her bed where I'd been doing my nails. Chris, please, carry the banner for me. Carry the banner? What do you mean, Mom? Why are you whispering? Shh, please. Just march and protest and make as much noise as possible. What you're doing is so important. Things have to change, promise me. Her gray eyes welled up. Okay, sure, Mom, I promise. No, honey, I mean it. It's too late for me. I can't do it, but you can. The sky is the limit for you, Chris. Please, do it for me. She seems smaller now, deliberately shrunken, as if not wanting to take up too much space. I wanted to grab her and say, it's not too late for you. You don't have to accept this. You are gifted and glorious and powerful. Why the fuck can't you see that? But I didn't say any of that. All those thoughts got caught in my throat. Instead, I just sat there, impenetrable and unforgiving as ever. I hardly recognized her face in the photo that appeared in the Detroit Free Press sometime later. Mom was standing beside her exquisite still life oil painting that won the top prize at the Detroit Art Fair. In this photo, her grin looked different to me. Effortless, earned, full of pride. Even though it was always difficult for her to sell her paintings instead of just giving them away, Mom became a gifted professional artist and then decided to get a pilot's license. Oh, just so you know, in case while Dad's flying our plane, he has a heart attack or something, I'll know how to get the darn thing back down. The first time she soloed, Dad and I were there. We watched her as she climbed into the cockpit of the small plane alone with her perfect hair and shiny red lipstick. She waved as she taxied down the runway. She took off, started to ascend, and then flew in circles above us. She disappeared behind the clouds, and I forgot to breathe. Nope, wait. Sorry. It was early morning. My 6-year-old son and I sat together at our breakfast table. I was helping him write a card for Mom, who had breast cancer now and was in the hospital. Here, write it with this. This is her favorite color, he said, handing me a cornflower blue crayon. Okay, sweetie, and what do you want it to say? Dear Grandma, I love the smile of you, from Wilson. Oh, I corrected him. No, honey, you mean that you love her smile, right? No, write what I said. He put his small, warm hand on top of mine, as if to guide it. After Mom died, we discovered a journal tucked under a perfumed sachet in the back of a drawer. In it was a note. It read, "My life has been so unbelievably full. Sure, I've had a few heartbreaks, but I always had faith that a forgiving attitude towards others, especially towards yourself, and a strong determination to keep smiling will let the sunshine in. I wish I hadn't spent all that time blaming her, yearning for her to be different. I wish I could have told her how much her journey helped embolden mine. Only she'd gotten angry with me, just stood her ground and said something like, 'Get off my fucking back, Christine. I'm doing the best I can. Stop judging me so much.' But she didn't. She never would have. No, she especially wouldn't have said fucking. In our family, she would have gone to jail for that. Now, many years later, I understand that my son was able to see something that I just couldn't. Her endless supply of smiles served her well, maybe even at times as a life jacket, the only thing that kept her afloat. And maybe other times when she sensed, even for a moment, that the sky was indeed the limit. Dear Mom, I love the smile of you. Sorry, it just took me a while.
It's an emotional passage to read. And I'm sure that that's so relatable to anyone, but definitely a certain age and era, as we were saying before. How did you home in on that metaphor of the smile? That must have taken some whittling down, because it's so beautiful. And you yourself have a beautiful smile. I mean, people must say you have your mother's smile.
Yeah. I smiled too much too. I'm in denial. It's not like she's the only one. But it's something that women are taught they have to do. I remember, well, first of all, let me answer your question. The smile of her actually came from a note that my son wrote to my mother, to his grandmother. And he said, just what I said. And I just found that letter that he wrote in my drawer, and I went, that's the story. He saw it. I couldn't. He could appreciate it. I couldn't, for many reasons. But going back to that idea of women having to smile, it's like it's our girl duty, right? You know, on the street, you constantly hear, especially when I was younger, I heard, well, what's the matter? Can't you smile? What do I? Right? As if we're always supposed to be, you know, pleasing them. But I remember for Chicago Hope, I would be preparing for a really emotional scene. I'd be wearing these headphones back when we had, I think, Walkmans. It was so long ago. Remember those? But I'd be preparing, and I'd be really intensely into this emotional thing I was about to go do, and these Teamsters who were driving their trucks would say, hey, what's the matter? Smile. As I was walking by them, and I said, what are you talking, what? I don't ask you to smile when you're working and you're driving your truck. I'm not telling you to smile. Why are you telling me to smile? It was really horrifying to me. So they stopped saying that to me.
How are we doing for time? Do we want to open time for questions? Okay. We are going to, Christine is going to take questions, but I'll select whoever wants to ask one, and then and your mic is on, right, Christine?
It's a very nice presentation. It sounds like you created and nurtured a young man that you would value as a man in our society and our appreciation of women. Can you tell us about some of the men or the man that you think epitomizes what you think we could grow up to be?
Well, it already sounds like you are one of those gentlemen because you recognize the need for men to, I think, be feminists. You know, basically it's just men need to believe that women should have equal rights. That's all it means. But what I try to teach my boys, first of all, my husband is a true feminist. And back then it was really hard to find one. I really lucked out. We've been married 35 years, and I don't know how I lucked out, because every other boyfriend, I know, but every other boyfriend I had, deep down, they said they were feminists or humanists, whatever they called themselves back then. Deep down, they wanted to squish me. They wanted to diminish me. They didn't want me to excel farther than they did. They felt I was that my success was somehow a statement about their failure. And it drove me crazy. And I finally found a man, I guess I was 33 when I met Tommy, and he really didn't want to hold me back. He really wanted me to fly. And that's the way it's been for 35 years. And we raised 3 children together as partners. And one of the things I really focused on this, and I think he was aware of this too, is that we wanted to teach our boys that whatever they're feeling, they should express it, they should own it, and that their anger, their tears, they're gifts to us. I want to know what they're angry about. I want to know what makes them cry. I want to see those tears because they're gifts. I get to know who they are. That's the only way I get to really know them intimately. So it was always encouraged in our house to express your feelings, male or female. My daughter never had any problem with it. She was sort of born, with an emotional instrument like her mother, I think. But I was raised in a household that unless you were happy, you were expected to go to your room and wait it out, right? Like if you're sad or angry, just go away and we don't want to hear about it. So that is part of the thing about raising boys. I also think that if boys can be friends with girls first, like have friendships when they're young with girls, don't wait until you're an adolescent and you have all those hormones running around. So you don't look at women, the first time you really get to be close to a woman is when you are so sexually driven that you start to think of women as a sexual conquest or an object. So if you've already established a platonic love of women and that kind of, cherishing friendship with women, I think it helps. So I would introduce young boys to girls as playmates as often and as possible.
How does your husband feel about the book?
He's really proud of me.
Sounds very supportive.
Yeah, he read every draft of every story. So, He really had no choice, and he was my champion. I had him as a captive audience, and I have trouble with boundaries sometimes. So I would ask him, and he would say, "Okay, this is the last time I'm going to read this particular draft. You could give me the next one, but I'm not going to read this draft again." He was amazing.
Anybody else have a question for Christine? Right here in front.
As an aspiring actor, just a question for you, between the temping and the waitressing and, being in an industry in which women are so sexualized and so much of your worth is based on your appearance. What did you tell yourself, as an actor, but then as a feminist, to keep going and keep moving forward and driving forward to motivate yourself?
Yeah, it's one of the most challenging professions. I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's very daunting the percentage of actors who actually are able to earn a living. It is daunting, but I was in a master's, I was getting my master's only 1 year for an MFA, and I left and moved to New York, but I had a professor who said to his class of actors, he said, "If you don't need to be here, if you don't need to be an actor, you should leave." And there were a lot of people that were kind of, "Oh, well, yeah." But I just felt, well, no, there's no question. I will find a way to do this. I was born an actor. I don't know, that sounds silly, but I just felt this yearning to have a bigger life than just Christine Lahti. I wanted to learn what it was like to be inside that person's skin and that person's skin and learn about you and what background you had and play the life of a Holocaust survivor and all the Southern spinster, and it's just, to me, it's such an incredibly rich profession because you get to make believe, and if you're good at that, fake it till you make it is basically the best advice I can give you. Even if you're not confident and you don't have the kind of assurity that I had, which is even in dark days, and I got so much discouragement, and so many men told me, "You're never going to make it," and there's a lot of that in the book. And every time a man told me, or anyone for that matter, that I didn't stand a chance, it made me stronger. It made me determined to prove them wrong. Michelle Obama talks about that a lot, that she had a lot of naysayers, and she thanks every one of them because it made her say, "Oh yeah? Oh, well, watch me." And that's a great, I think, skill to have. But faking it till you make it, just, if you're not confident, just fake it, and you'll convince others. Right here.
I'm just curious, which one are you in the picture?
Okay, I'm the one with the good little girl with the arms folded right there, the hands, with a little bob. That's me.
My question is, when you're finished with your book tour, what do you have coming up next?
My hope is to collaborate with a playwright and adapt this book into a one-woman show. That's what I would like to do. Yeah, thank you. I performed a lot of the stories, but just as a workshop, I didn't really find a through line and a journey, so I'm hoping to collaborate and do that. And then I'm also developing a dramedy for television with a new writer, a playwright, about an older woman who's being told to go out to pasture and become invisible, and she tries valiantly and many times foolishly to stay visible. And it's kind of, I can relate to it. I hope it gets sold. We don't know. I mean, now is such a good time. I think people are wanting to tell stories that aren't being told. Older women are not anywhere on screen. I mean, we have one show. We get Grace and Frankie, which is fabulous, but we get one show? No. There's a lot more stories that need to be told, and if I have anything to say about it, it's going to be told.
In this crazy world that we live in today, there's all kinds of questions I want to ask you, because we came up in a crazy world, and you were at a place and time in the Midwest, and you went to school in Ann Arbor just after the SDS, just years after the next presidential election. But with your authenticity that you shared with us, I'll spare the deeper questions about the Me Too movement and how that's changed things. A couple of trivia questions for you. What kind of station wagon did you have? Have you ever been to Finland? And if you're a sports fan, if in the college football championship the Florida State Seminoles played the Michigan Wolverines, who would you be rooting for?
These are all phenomenal questions. What was the first one again? What? Oh, Mercury. Mercury station wagon. It was the faux wood. You know, remember those? Yeah.
But my daughter went off. My children lost their mother 11 years ago, so I've been raising my kids. My youngest just turned 19. He graduated last June, and you know, I was prepared by my grandmother from Sweden on how to raise them. You know, food and cooking and stuff. It wasn't my education and my grad school. I had an opportunity to spend a couple of years in Ann Arbor later in life. My daughter went off to Madison, Wisconsin, and she's a feminist and into politics and, you know, different things. We had our issues, you know, because of the ages. Maybe a little something to do with that Wolverine Badger stuff, too. Don't get along.
Well, you sound like an incredible father to raise both boys and girls, and they're very lucky, it sounds like, to have you raise them. I know that there are differences, and, you know, children should hate us and push us away for a while, but then they got to come back and love us again. But, okay, the answer to your other question was, okay, I always voted blue, go blue, Michigan. I only spent 1 year at Florida, and Ann Arbor was my heart. And my dad went to Ann Arbor, and my brother and sister went to Ann Arbor, so that was my big. And no, I've never been to Finland, but my parents went, and my grandparents were from Finland. And interestingly, my father's mother was a feminist from Finland who started her own radio station in the UP of Michigan. And her husband was more of a stay-at-home dad and had a grocery store. But my dad wanted the opposite. He wanted a wife who would be, you know, the more of I don't want to say doormat because my mother was way more than that, but someone who would stay home and raise the children. And he could be the breadwinner, more of that classic sort of 50s, you know, patriarchal thing. Well, I agree, and I think the problem is that she did more work than my dad. My dad was a surgeon, but she had raising 6 kids and the emotional work, and she had someone clean once a week, but she cleaned this huge house by her. She did so much, and it was not respected. That was the problem. But now I think it's different. I think because women choose now, they have a choice to stay at home and be a mom. I think it's much more respected now, but I agree with you. It's probably a lot more rewarding than being an accountant or whatever.
We have time for one more right here.
One more? Okay.
Hi, really enjoyed this. What
you.
was your parents' response or reaction when you told them you wanted to be an actor? That's what you wanted to do with your life.
They were completely supportive. They said, and they always said, if you work hard enough, the sky is the limit. That's why I keep saying I refer to the sky as the limit, because I heard that my whole life from both my mother and father, that it would take a lot of hard work, but if you keep at it, you'll achieve anything you want. And they were supportive. They never even said things like, well, maybe you should get that teaching certificate as a backup. They didn't even say that. They just said, go for it, you'll figure it out. And, you know, I waitressed, and I waitressed, and then I finally did get a commercial, and I didn't have to sleep with the director for it. Thank you so much.